At family dinner, my sister declared, Mom and Dad said, "You never contribute anything to this family." Everyone applauded. I smiled and said, "Perfect." Then the $8,000 I've been paying for their mortgage every month stops today. Dad choked on his drink, and Mom turned pale. The roast chicken sat in the center of the table, golden and perfect, just like everything else my mother prepared for these monthly gatherings. I watched the steam rise from the mashed potatoes while my sister Lauren cleared her throat for what I knew would be another performance. So, as I was saying, Lauren continued, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for moments when she wanted everyone's attention. The renovation on our guest bathroom is finally complete. Marble countertops, heated floors, the works. Derek spared no expense. Her husband, Derek, nodded smugly from beside her, his arm draped possessively across the back of her chair. My nephew Tyler, all of 8 years old, was playing with his food while my parents sat at opposite ends of the table like monarchs surveying their kingdom. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart," Mom said, beaming at Lauren with a kind of pride that used to make my stomach turn. Now it just made me tired. I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting my chicken into smaller and smaller pieces. This was my strategy for these dinners. Stay quiet, stay invisible, get through it, go home. "Must be nice having Derek's income," Aunt Patricia chimed in from across the table. She was Mom's sister, and she never missed these dinners, probably because the food was free and the drama was entertaining. "A senior partner at 35. That's impressive." 36, Derek corrected, though nobody had asked. "Just had a birthday last month." "Which reminds me," Lauren said, and I felt something shift in the air. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "We've been talking, and we think it's time we address something as a family." Here we go, I thought. I set down my fork. Lauren reached over and squeezed Mom's hand. "It's been bothering Mom and Dad for a while now, and honestly, it bothers Derek and me, too. We just think someone needs to say it." My father, who had been quietly eating until this point, suddenly looked very interested in his wineglass. Mom's expression transformed into something softer, more sympathetic, which was somehow worse than her usual critical stare. "Say what?" I heard myself ask, even though I knew I shouldn't engage. Lauren took a deep breath like she was preparing to deliver difficult news. "Shirley, you're 32 years old. You've been working at the same mid-level marketing job for 5 years. You're still renting that tiny apartment downtown. You drive a car that's nearly a decade old." "My car runs fine," I said quietly. "That's not the point." Lauren's voice took on an edge. "The point is, you're not moving forward. You're not contributing. You're just existing." Derek nodded sagely, as if Lauren had just quoted philosophy instead of spouting nonsense. Tyler asked if he could be excused, and Lauren told him to sit still. "I have a good job," I said, hearing the defensive note in my voice and hating it. "I pay my bills. I'm doing fine." "Are you, though?" This came from Aunt Patricia, who apparently felt entitled to weigh in on my life. When Lauren and Derek bought their house, they invited the whole family to a housewarming party. When they had Tyler, there was a beautiful nursery ready. They contribute, they build, they achieve. My hands were shaking under the table. I pressed them against my thighs. "Honey," Mom said, and her tone was so condescending I almost laughed. "We love you. We do. But Lauren has a point. You've never really contributed much to this family. You keep to yourself. You barely visit, and when you do come around, you don't bring anything to the table, literally or figuratively." I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "Because I brought wine tonight, and last month I brought dessert, and the month before." "That's not what your mother means," Dad interrupted. He finally sat down his wineglass and looked at me directly. "She means you don't participate, you don't help. When we needed someone to watch the house while we went on that cruise, Lauren stepped up. When we needed help moving furniture, Derek and Lauren came over. You're always too busy." "I was working," I protested. I couldn't take time off on such short notice. "There's always an excuse with you," Lauren said, and now she was standing up, really getting into her moment. "Do you know how many times I've covered for you? How many times I've had to explain to people why my sister can't be bothered to show up for family events?" "What events?" "I'm here every month for these dinners. Tyler's birthday party last year. You left after an hour. I had food poisoning." "Did you, though?" Lauren's eyebrows rose dramatically. Or were you just uncomfortable because everyone there was successful and you felt out of place? The table had gone silent. Even Tyler had stopped fidgeting. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see how I would respond to this ambush. I don't know what you want me to say, I managed. Lauren sat back down, folding her hands on the table like a CEO leading a board meeting. I want you to acknowledge that you've been a disappointment, that you've let this family down, that while the rest of us have been building lives and contributing to something bigger than ourselves, you've been coasting along, taking up space. Lauren, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That's cruel. It's honest, she shot back. Someone needed to say it. Mom and Dad have been too nice, too patient with you. But I'm done watching you drift through life while they worry about you constantly. I looked at my parents. Dad was studying his plate again. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin like this whole thing was making her emotional instead of being something she'd clearly orchestrated. Is this true? I asked them. You told Lauren you feel this way about me? We're concerned, honey? Mom said, we just want better for you. Better? I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Look, Derek chimed in, because apparently he felt his input was needed. I'm going to be blunt here. At your age, Lauren and I already had our house, our son, our careers on track. We had something to show for our efforts. What do you have? The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I have? I had exhaustion. I had anxiety. I had years of watching my sister get praised for everything, while I got criticized for not being enough. I had a relationship with my parents that felt more obligatory than loving. I had monthly dinners where I felt like a ghost at my own family's table. And I had something else, something none of them knew about. You're right, I said suddenly, and everyone looked surprised. You're absolutely right. I don't contribute anything to this family. Lauren leaned back in her chair, satisfied. I'm glad you can finally admit it. Mom? Dad? I continued, looking directly at them. Lauren's correct. I haven't contributed anything meaningful. I haven't helped with your house or your renovations. I haven't been there for the big moments. Well, Mom said carefully, we appreciate you acknowledging that. So, it's settled then, Lauren said, actually smiling now. Maybe this can be a turning point for you, Shirley. Maybe you can finally start making something of yourself. Around the table I saw nods. Aunt Patricia looked pleased with how this intervention had gone. Derek had that smug expression people get when they think they've helped someone see the light. Tyler was confused but quiet. I stood up. Every pair of eyes followed me. Since we're all in agreement that I contribute nothing, I said, keeping my voice steady and calm, then I suppose there's no reason for me to continue with the payments. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. What payments? I smiled. It felt strange on my face, unfamiliar. The $8,000 I've been transferring to your account every single month for the past 3 years, the money that's been covering your mortgage. The color drained from Mom's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Dad started coughing, choking on the wine he just sipped. Lauren's expression transformed from smug satisfaction to complete confusion. What are you talking about? Lauren demanded. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned it around so everyone could see the screen. Transaction after transaction every month. $8,000 sent to an account under my parents' names. 3 years ago, I explained my voice calm. Dad came to me privately. He told me they were in trouble. The business had some bad quarters. They'd refinanced the house twice and couldn't keep up with payments. They were going to lose it. Dad's face had gone from pale to red. Mom was gripping the edge of the table. He asked me not to tell anyone because Mom was embarrassed. Said it would crush her if Lauren found out they weren't as financially stable as everyone thought. So I've been paying their mortgage every month for 36 months. That's $288,000 if anyone's counting. Lauren turned to our parents. Is this true? Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Shirley, he said, his voice rough, this isn't the time. No, Dad, this is exactly the time. I looked around the table. Everyone here just spent the last 20 minutes telling me what a disappointment I am, how I don't contribute, how I'm just taking up space in this family. So I'm agreeing with you. Starting tomorrow, those payments stop. You can't do that. Mom finally found her voice. We had an arrangement. An arrangement? I let out a laugh that didn't sound like me at all. An arrangement you told me to keep secret so Lauren wouldn't know. An arrangement where I've been paying your bills while you let everyone think I'm a failure. Derek was doing math in his head. I could see it. His eyes had widened as he realized just how much money we were talking about. Wait, Lawrence said slowly. You're saying you've had enough money to pay their mortgage all this time? Where did you get that kind of money? My mid-level marketing job, I said, letting the words land. The one you all just spent dinner mocking. I'm a senior strategist. I make $180,000 a year. I could afford a house like yours, Derek, but I chose to keep renting my tiny apartment so I could help our parents keep theirs. The silence was absolute. But you said Lauren started. I never said anything about what I make, I corrected her. You all just assumed. You saw my old car and my small apartment and decided I must be struggling. Nobody ever asked. Not once in 3 years did anyone at this table ask me how I was really doing. Aunt Patricia had the decency to look uncomfortable. Tyler asked his mom what was happening, and she shushed him. Shirley, please, Dad said, and his voice cracked. Can we discuss this privately? Why? So you can convince me to keep funding your lifestyle while everyone thinks I'm the family disappointment. So Mom can keep crying about how worried she is about me while I'm literally keeping a roof over her head. That's not fair, Mom said, tears streaming down her face now. We never asked you to pay that much. You offered. You're right. I did offer because you're my parents and you were in trouble and I loved you enough to help, but apparently that didn't count as contributing to the family. Apparently, being there when you actually needed me meant nothing compared to showing up with expensive bottles of wine and stories about bathroom renovations. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair. My hands had stopped shaking. In fact, I felt steadier than I had in years. The payment scheduled for Friday will be the last one, I said. After that, you're on your own. Maybe Lauren and Derek can help. After all, they're the ones who contribute around here. Shirley, wait. Dad moved toward me, but I stepped back. I've waited. I told him. I've waited for someone in this family to see me, to value me, to treat me like I matter. I'm done waiting. Lauren found her voice again. You can't just abandon them. They're our parents. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply agreeing with you. I don't contribute anything. Remember, you all made that very clear, so my lack of contribution won't be missed. This is blackmail, Derek said suddenly. You're using money to manipulate them. I turned to look at him. Really? Look at him. This man who had sat at my parents' table eating food, bought with money I provided while judging me. No, Derek, this is a boundary. I'm stopping something that was never appreciated. If you think that's manipulation, maybe you should look up the definition. I walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. Mom was crying harder now. Dad was trying to explain something to Lauren, who was shouting questions. Aunt Patricia was asking if someone could please clarify what just happened. Tyler was definitely crying. At the door, I paused and turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I said, I really did get food poisoning at Tyler's birthday party. I spent that night in the emergency room. I texted Mom from the hospital. She never responded. Mom's face crumbled. I thought you were making an excuse. I know, I said simply. That's the problem. I left my parents' house and got into my decade-old car that ran perfectly fine. I drove back to my tiny downtown apartment that I'd carefully chosen because it was in my budget after helping my parents. I walked past my modest furniture and my small kitchen and my view of the alley, and I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone started ringing before I even got my shoes off. Dad. I declined the call. Then Mom. Then Lauren. I declined them all and turned off my phone. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my small balcony looking out at the city lights. The air was cool and I could hear traffic in the distance. The ambient hum of life continuing regardless of personal drama. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was adrenaline, not fear. 3 years. 3 entire years of sacrifice, and they'd never once acknowledged it. I thought back to that first conversation with Dad. He'd shown up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I'd just gotten home from a particularly brutal workday, and I was still in my professional clothes when he knocked. His face had been gray, aged in a way I hadn't noticed before. Can I come in? He'd asked, and something in his voice told me this wasn't a casual visit. We'd sat at this very same small kitchen table. He couldn't meet my eyes as he explained how bad things had gotten. The business he'd invested in with his friend Martin had collapsed. The friend had disappeared with most of the capital. Dad had been too embarrassed to tell Mom the full extent of the losses. He'd refinanced their house twice, trying to cover the shortfall, and now the payments were more than they could manage on his retirement income and Mom's part-time bookkeeping job. "We're going to lose everything," he'd said, and I'd never seen my father cry before that moment. "Your mother doesn't know how bad it is. She thinks we're just having a tight month. If she finds out I've destroyed our financial security, it'll kill her." I'd wanted to ask why he hadn't gone to Lauren first. Lauren with her lawyer husband and their big house and their seemingly perfect life. But I already knew the answer. Lauren would have judged him. Lauren would have told everyone. Lauren couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it, and she'd have held it over their heads forever. "How much do you need?" I'd asked. When he told me the mortgage payment, I'd done quick math in my head. I'd just gotten a significant raise at work, a promotion to senior strategist that had bumped my salary to a level I'd never imagined reaching. I was living well below my means, saving aggressively, planning for a future that felt abstract and far away. I could afford it. "Technically, I can help," I'd said. "But Dad, you have to tell Mom eventually. This can't be a permanent solution." He promised me it would only be for a few months, a year at most. Just until he got back on his feet, found some consulting work, built their savings back up. He promised that was 3 years ago. In that time, I'd watched my savings account flatten instead of grow. I passed on opportunities because I couldn't afford the risk. My coworker, Jessica, had invited me to invest in a startup with her, something that could have doubled my money, but I declined because I couldn't spare the capital. Another friend had asked me to go on a girls' trip to Hawaii, and I'd made up an excuse about work because I couldn't justify the expense. I'd dated someone for 6 months, a guy named Alex, who I'd really liked. When he started talking about moving in together, about finding a place we could share, I panicked. How could I explain that I couldn't afford to upgrade my living situation, that my modest lifestyle wasn't a choice, but a necessity created by a secret I couldn't share? The relationship had fizzled out, and he told a mutual friend he thought I wasn't serious about a future together. He'd been right, but not for the reasons he thought. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and 32 text messages. I made myself coffee and read through them while sitting at my small kitchen table. "Dad, please call us. We need to talk about this." "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to feel unappreciated. Please don't do this. Lauren, you're being completely unreasonable. Call me immediately." "Derek, as someone with financial expertise, I think we should all sit down and discuss this rationally. Aunt Patricia, I had no idea about any of this. Your mother is devastated." There were more variations on themes of desperation, anger, and belated appreciation. I deleted most of them and composed a single group message. I meant what I said. "The payment stopped Friday. You have 3 days to figure out your finances. Don't contact me again until you're ready to have a conversation where I'm treated with actual respect." I sent it and then blocked their numbers for 48 hours. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out who I was without the weight of my family's expectations crushing me. Work that week was a welcome distraction. My colleague Marcus noticed I seemed different, lighter somehow. During lunch, he asked if something good had happened. I quit. "Something that wasn't good for me," I told him. "Good for you," he said, raising his coffee cup in a toast. "Life's too short for things that drain us." Marcus didn't know how right he was. We'd worked together for 4 years, sat in adjacent cubicles, collaborated on dozens of campaigns, and he knew almost nothing about my personal life. Not because he wasn't friendly, but because I'd learned to keep my world separate. Work Shirley was confident, creative, assertive. Family Shirley was quiet, apologetic, invisible. "You should come out with us Friday," Marcus continued. "Sarah's organizing drinks for her birthday. The whole team's going to that new rooftop bar downtown." I declined every single happy hour invitation for 3 years. Always too tired, always had plans, always some excuse that was technically true, but missed the real reason. I couldn't afford to spend $50 on overpriced cocktails when I was sending $8,000 to my parents every month. "I'll be there," I said, and Marcus looked genuinely surprised. "Yeah, that's great. Sarah will be thrilled. She's always saying she wishes you'd come hang out more. The idea that my coworkers wanted me around, that they noticed my absence and cared about it, felt strange and wonderful. At work, I was valued. My ideas were respected. My contributions were recognized and compensated. I'd been living in this parallel universe where half my life made sense and the other half was a nightmare, and I just decided which world I wanted to inhabit. Thursday afternoon, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was from Derek, sent from what must have been a personal account rather than his work email. Shirley, I hope you read this. I owe you an apology. At dinner, I participated in something cruel, and I did it without knowing the full story. Lauren told me everything after you left. I'm ashamed of how I behaved. You've been supporting your parents while I sat there in their home eating food purchased with your money, judging you for not measuring up to some arbitrary standard of success. I was wrong. I'm going to encourage Lauren to reach out to you, but I wanted you to hear directly from me. I'm sorry. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to buy you coffee and apologize in person. No pressure. I understand if you'd rather not, Derek. I read it 3 times. It was measured, genuine, free of the pompous tone Derek usually carried. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I saved it to a folder and went back to work. That evening, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Patricia standing in the hallway holding a casserole dish. Patricia, I said, opening the door, but not inviting her in. I brought you lasagna, she said, holding up the dish like a peace offering. Your mother's recipe. That's kind, but I'm fine. Can I come in just for a minute? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She walked into my apartment and looked around with obvious surprise. This is nice, she said. Cozy. I always pictured it as more cramped. Everyone did, I said flatly. That was kind of the point of what happened at dinner. She set the casserole on my kitchen counter and turned to face me. I feel terrible about what happened. I had no idea about the money, about what you've been doing for your parents. Would it have changed anything? Would you have spoken up when Lauren was tearing me apart? Aunt Patricia had the grace to look ashamed. Probably not. I'm embarrassed to admit that. I've always seen Lauren as the successful one, the one who had it all figured out. And you were so quiet, so private. I made assumptions. Everyone did. Your mother is devastated. She's been crying for days. Your father barely speaks. They know they've lost your trust, and they don't know how to fix it. Maybe they can't fix it, I said. Maybe some things once broken stay broken. You don't mean that. I might. I haven't decided yet. I crossed my arms. Why are you really here? Did my parents send you? She sighed. Your mother asked me to check on you, to make sure you're okay, to see if there's any chance you'll reconsider about the mortgage payments. There it is. I felt anger rising in my chest. Even now, even after everything, it's still about the money. Not about how they treated me, not about rebuilding a relationship, but about whether I'll keep paying their bills. That's not fair. Your mother is genuinely worried about you. She should have been worried about me 3 years ago. She should have been worried every time Lauren made a snide comment about my life. She should have been worried when I spent Christmas alone because I was too busy to come to their party. But she wasn't. She was worried about her house and her reputation and making sure Lauren stayed happy. Aunt Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You're right. Everything you're saying is right. I'm not here to defend them. I'm here because I love my sister, and I love you, and I hate seeing this family fall apart. It was already falling apart, I told her. I was just the only one holding it together, and nobody noticed. On Friday morning, I logged into my banking app and canceled the recurring transfer. My finger hovered over the confirm button for only a second before I pressed it. Done. My phone immediately started buzzing, a text from Dad. Please don't do this. We can talk. We can fix this. Another from Mom. Shirley, please, I'm begging you. We need that payment. I turned my phone face down and got ready for work. In the mirror, I looked the same as always, but I felt fundamentally different, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for years and had finally set it down. At the office, I threw myself into a presentation I was developing for a major client. The campaign was ambitious, creative, exactly the kind of work that had earned me my promotion and my salary. My boss, Stephanie, Stop by my desk around 11. The mock-ups look great, she said. Client's going to love them. You have a real gift for this, Shirley. Thanks, I said, and actually meant it. You seem energized lately, more engaged. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. If only she knew that what I was doing was blowing up my family relationships and canceling six-figure financial commitments. But she was right. I did feel energized. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. Surely, it was Mom calling from what must have been a neighbor's phone. The payment didn't go through. Please, we need to talk about this. Mom, I told you the payments are done. You have until next week to figure out your mortgage. But we can't figure it out in a week. We need more time. You've had 3 years, I said calmly. That's more time than most people get. I have to go. I'm at work. I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked that number too. That evening, I went to Sarah's birthday drinks. The rooftop bar was sleek and modern, with a view of the city skyline that took my breath away. My co-workers were already there, laughing and talking, and when I walked in, Sarah actually squealed. Shirley, you came. I'm so glad you're here. She hugged me, and I realized this was the first genuine, uncomplicated affection I'd received in months. No judgment, no expectations, just happiness that I'd shown up. Marcus bought me a drink. Sarah introduced me to people from other departments I'd only known by email. We talked about work and movies and restaurants and absolutely nothing related to family or money or disappointment. It was normal, easy, fun. Around 9, I stepped out onto the balcony for some air. The city stretched out below, millions of lights, millions of lives being lived. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably panicking about their mortgage. Lauren was probably crafting some strategy to fix everything. But here, in this moment, I was just Shirley. Not the disappointing daughter, not the secret benefactor, just me. You okay? Marcus had followed me outside. Better than okay, I said. This was really nice. Thank you for inviting me. We've been inviting you for years, he pointed out gently. What changed? I did, I said simply. I stopped living my life according to other people's expectations. Good, he said. For what it's worth, you seem happier. When I got home that night, there were 17 missed calls. I listened to none of the voicemails. Instead, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place, the one I'd stopped ordering from because it was too expensive. I ate pad thai on my couch, watching a mindless action movie, feeling more content than I had in years. Saturday morning brought a knock at my door. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Lauren stood there looking worse than she had at my office. She'd been crying, her eyes red and puffy. Can we please talk? She asked. I let her in. We sat on opposite ends of my couch, the space between us vast. Mom and Dad are going to lose the house, she said without preamble. I know. Doesn't that bother you? Of course it bothers me, I said. I'm not a monster, Lauren, but it bothers me more that they let you humiliate me while I was keeping them afloat. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. There's a difference. You never asked about my life, my job, my finances. You just assumed I was failing and treated me accordingly. Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Derek and I had a huge fight last night about money, about our lifestyle, about priorities. He told me we're living paycheck to paycheck despite his salary. He said we've been performing success while drowning in debt. I'm sorry, I said, and found that I meant it. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you seem to have it all figured out. Good salary, low expenses, savings in the bank. You were smarter than all of us. I wasn't smarter. I was just quieter about my choices. And I paid a price for helping Mom and Dad. I gave up opportunities, relationships, experiences. I don't regret helping them, but I do regret letting everyone think less of me while I did it. What do we do now? Lauren asked. Derek and I calculated what we could contribute to the mortgage. We can do $4,000 a month if we cut back on everything, but that's only half. Then they'll need to figure out the other half. Sell something, downsize, find roommates. I don't know, Lauren. And honestly, it's not my problem anymore. There are parents and there are adults who made financial decisions that didn't work out. That's not on me to fix forever. Lauren stood up abruptly. I came here hoping you'd change your mind, that you'd see reason. I have seen reason. That's exactly why I'm not changing my mind. Fine, she said coldly. But when they lose everything, when they're struggling and miserable, remember that you could have prevented it. I'll remember that I prevented it for 3 years while being called a disappointment, I shot back. I'll remember that I sacrificed my own security for theirs and nobody cared. I'll remember all of it, Lauren. Will you? She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. Shirley, please. The payment didn't go through. I know, Mom, I canceled it. But the mortgage is due. If we don't pay by next week, we'll start accruing late fees. Then I suggest you figure it out. Sell something, cut expenses, ask Lauren and Derek for help. Those are the same options you would have had 3 years ago if I hadn't stepped in. You said you'd give us until Friday. Today is Friday, Mom, and I gave you 3 years of Fridays. That's 156 payments I made while being told I contributed nothing. She was crying. We never said you contributed nothing. You stood there and watched Lauren say it. You nodded along when everyone agreed. You let them tear me apart at your dinner table, a dinner table I've been paying for. We didn't know you were paying for everything. You knew, I said quietly. You knew I was paying your mortgage. You chose not to connect those dots because it was easier to let everyone think poorly of me than to admit you needed help. That's on you, not me. There was silence on the other end, broken only by her soft crying. I have to go, I said. I have a meeting. When can we talk? Really talk? When you're ready to see me as I actually am, not as the disappointment you've convinced everyone I am. I hung up before she could respond. The following Monday, Lauren showed up at my office. Security called up to ask if I wanted to see her. I was tempted to say no, but curiosity got the better of me. She looked terrible. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled, her makeup was minimal, and she was wearing jeans instead of her usual designer outfits. Can we talk? She asked. I led her to a conference room. We sat across from each other at the large table, the space between us feeling symbolic. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm so sorry, Shirley. I had no idea about the money, about any of it. Would it have mattered? I asked. If you'd known I made good money, would you have treated me differently? Or would you have found some other reason to put me down? She flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? You spent years making me feel small, Lauren. The money just gave you an easy target. I was jealous, she said suddenly. And I was so surprised, I just stared at her. You always seem so free. No mortgage stress, no keeping up appearances, no pressure. You just lived your life quietly while I was constantly performing. So you decided to make me miserable because you were jealous. I didn't decide anything. It just happened, and then it became a pattern. Mocked Shirley for her small apartment, her old car, her simple life. It made me feel better about the fact that Derek and I are drowning in debt trying to maintain an image. You're in debt? She laughed bitterly. The guest bathroom renovation? Financed. The trip to Europe last summer? Credit cards. We make good money, but we spend more trying to look successful. It's exhausting. I didn't know what to say to that. The point is, Lauren continued, I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm sorry. What I said at dinner was cruel and unfair. I was performing again, trying to deflect attention from my own problems by making yours seem bigger. And Mom and Dad went along with it. They're embarrassed, humiliated. Dad came to me yesterday and explained everything. How he came to you 3 years ago, how you've been paying their mortgage this whole time, how they asked you to keep it quiet. So now you know, I said. Does it change anything? It changes everything, Lauren said earnestly. Shirley, you've been supporting our parents while I've been criticizing you for not helping enough. I feel like a monster. You should, I said bluntly. You ambushed me at dinner. You turned everyone against me. You made me feel worthless in front of the whole family. I know. Tears were streaming down her face now. I know, and I can't take it back, but I can try to make it right. Derek and I talked, really talked. We're going to help with the mortgage. We can't afford the whole thing, but we can cover half if you'd be willing to cover the other half. I shook my head. No. Shirley, please. No, I repeated firmly. I'm done with that arrangement. If you want to help Mom and Dad, that's between you and them, but I'm out. They're going to lose the house. Maybe they should, I said. Lauren looked shocked. Maybe they need to downsize. Maybe they've been living beyond their means for too long. Maybe losing the house would force them to make real changes instead of just accepting money from me while pretending everything is fine. You don't mean that. I do, Lauren. They let me be the family scapegoat for 3 years while I was literally keeping them afloat. They never defended me. They never acknowledged what I was doing. They joined in when you called me a disappointment. Why should I keep protecting them from the consequences of their own choices? Lauren sat back in her chair, deflated. So that's it? You're just done with all of us? I'm done being treated like I don't matter. If any of you want a relationship with me, it starts with respect. Real respect. Not just appreciation for my bank account. What do we do now? You figure out how to help mom and dad if you want to. You apologize to Tyler for making him watch that scene at dinner. You work on your own marriage and your own debt, and maybe eventually we can try to rebuild something. But it won't look like it did before. Lauren stood up slowly. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I've been a terrible sister. Yeah, I agreed. You have been. She left, and I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes, processing. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Meeting starting soon. You okay? I smiled. On my way. I'm good. And I was, for the first time in 3 years, I was actually good. The weeks that followed were difficult. My parents tried every approach. Guilt, anger, bargaining, promises to change. I held firm. I showed up to a family therapy session they arranged, but only after they agreed to certain ground rules: honesty, accountability, no manipulation. In that session, Dad finally admitted he'd been in financial trouble for 5 years, not 3. He'd made bad investments, tried to hide the losses from Mom, and dug himself deeper trying to fix things. When I offered to help, it had felt like a lifeline, but also like a shameful secret. Mom admitted she'd known I was struggling emotionally at those family dinners, but had never said anything because she didn't want to rock the boat with Lauren. She'd taken the path of least resistance, which meant sacrificing me to keep Lauren happy. Lauren attended too, with Derek. They admitted they'd been using their lifestyle to measure their worth, and seeing me live simply had threatened that narrative. Tearing me down had been easier than examining their own choices. It was painful and messy and necessary. I didn't forgive them immediately. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't a single moment, but a process. Some days I was angry. Some days I was sad. Some days I felt nothing at all. My parents did lose the house eventually. They couldn't make the payments even with Lauren and Derek helping. They moved into a much smaller condo, and honestly, they seemed happier, less stressed about maintaining appearances, more focused on what actually mattered. Lauren and Derek started going to financial counseling. They sold the house with the expensive guest bathroom and bought something more modest. Their marriage improved once they stopped competing with everyone around them. As for me, I kept my small apartment for another year before buying a place of my own. Not a mansion or a showpiece, but a cozy 2-bedroom with a great view and a mortgage I could easily afford. I adopted a dog. I started dating someone who thought my old car was charming, my job impressive, and my boundaries healthy. I went to family dinners again eventually, but they were smaller affairs at my parents' condo. Tyler was older now, and he apologized to me one day for not saying anything at that dinner years ago. I told him he was 8, and it wasn't his responsibility. He hugged me, and it felt like something healing. Lauren and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. We'd never be best friends, but we became actual sisters. She stopped performing, and I stopped hiding. We learned to be honest with each other, even when it was uncomfortable. The day she called to tell me she was pregnant with her second child, she said something I'll never forget. I want this baby to grow up knowing their Aunt Shirley, the real you, not the version I made up to make myself feel better. I'd like that, I told her. Mom framed a photo from that therapy session and hung it in their new place. In it, none of us are smiling perfectly for the camera. We look exhausted and raw and real. Under it, she wrote, "The day we started over." Sometimes I look at my banking app and see the money accumulating that used to go to my parents. I think about the 3 years of payments, the $288,000 I gave without recognition. Part of me mourns that money and what I could have done with it. But mostly I feel proud. Not because I gave the money, but because I knew when to stop. Because I recognized my worth even when nobody else did. Because I chose myself when it mattered most. That dinner, where Lauren declared, "I contributed nothing and everyone applauded," was the worst night of my life, but it was also the catalyst for everything that came after. The moment I stopped accepting scraps and started demanding my seat at the table. The moment I realized that contribution isn't measured in dollars or bathroom renovations or perfectly styled appearances, It's measured in honesty, in courage, and in the willingness to say enough is enough. I smiled and said the payments would stop, and my whole world changed. Sometimes the quietest moments of resistance are the loudest declarations of self-worth.